I think it's time to build a Star Wars A-Wing starfighter from Bandai. Hey, I'm John from John Bius Scale Models. Thanks so much for joining me for this video. Bandai's A-Wing starfighter is one of the best examples of their, what I call the alphabet soup fighters from the Star Wars universe. The A-Wing, the B-Wing, X-Wing, and the Y-Wing. All of them are great. I've built all of them. But this one I love for its simplicity and its just cool look. I mean, this looks like if you tell a kid, okay, draw a starfighter, a spaceship fighter, the shape of this is what many of us, you remember as a kid, you do a triangle and a bubble top and some lasers on the side. That's this. It's just got a cool look. I love the X-Wing, love the Y-Wing, love the B-Wing, but I think this one, in terms of just nostalgia for the shape and the simplicity and fun of the build, is one of the best that Bandai puts out. Now, I'd built this kit before, and I have there's a link down below in the description to my blog where I talked about building it. But I thought it was such fun. I said, I need to do this again for video because it's a great kit. And this is the kind of kit that if you're wanting to get into modeling, say with one of your kids or a niece or nephew, or just a younger person who is special to you, this is a great kit to start because you can sit down and guide them through it, but they can do most of the work. And even, you don't even have to paint it. It will come out looking cool, and they will have something that they've accomplished and that they have had fun with and that they can play with, which is often a great thing to connect the building in the hobby to something more long-term that they'll enjoy, is if they get to play with it. Assembly of the kit is simple enough. Bandai's instructions are very easy to follow. They give you plenty of indications of how things are to be oriented, sections to look for. It's a fairly conventional breakdown. There's a simple cockpit that you put together, and then you put it inside parts of the fuselage, and you just kind of go through and put the parts on. This model fits so good that I found out on my previous build that you can paint all of the parts and then assemble it, and it will work out just fine, which makes it really easy for getting things painted. There's also a cool base that comes with it that not only has an area to hold the model up, but also a way to have this, you can hook this tower up next to it or position it near it so that it looks really cool. And it allows you to do some fairly dynamic poses of how you want to display it on your shelf with the gun right next to it, like it's flying by on the surface of the Death Star or something like that. So plenty of coolness there. All right, the next step is to start getting parts off of sprues and building sub-assemblies. So I'm going to go do that off camera for a little bit, and I'll show you the sub-assemblies that I put together and go through some of the painting. I'm also going to detail looking at how I paint the cockpit and get that ready for the interior. All right, this is the parts breakdown that I like to go with for the A-Wing fighter. Now, most of this is either just some partial assemblies or just single parts, but the fit is so good that the whole thing can be painted this way. So you can paint the white parts separately, the red parts, the black parts, and then bring them all together at the end, and it just works. It's a fabulous little kit with fabulous fit. The only exceptions are on these side pieces. I put in that little black hose that goes there. And here where the exhausts are, I put in those. And on the side of the wing, I put in those. Those are easy enough, small enough, and well-defined enough that those can be brush painted afterwards, so I don't worry about keeping those separate. All right, the next step is going to be to paint the cockpit and the pilot and get those looking good. I disassembled the cockpit and painted everything in Tamiya XF69 NATO black. The pilot was painted with XF66 sky gray so that it won't be quite as hard to cover up a very dark color with the paints that are going to come later. I also made sure that on the fuselage assembly I painted this area black because that middle part in here is going to be showing through in this opening in the cockpit. First thing I'm going to do is dry brush Vallejo Sky Gray onto all the cockpit parts. I'm going to do a fairly heavy dry brush because I want a really good high contrast look. While I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm going to give the pilot's face a rough coating of Citadel's Kislev flesh. In some of the areas that I dry brushed, I'm going to paint some Citadel Contrast paint over the top. I'm using black Templar. And what I'll do is I'll go into the areas that are the most recessed on a panel like this and just paint that in, and that'll help bring out a little more of the volumes of those raised areas. You can see on both of these panels it just brings out a little more height into those raised panels so that they have just a little more volume to them. Not that anybody's ever going to see this detail. I'm going to apply another Citadel Contrast paint called Guilliman Flesh to the pilot's face. I'm just going to drop it in there in a fairly heavy blob like that initially, making sure I get his neck all the way around. And then I'm just going to work that out so that there's no areas that are too blobby. For the dials and buttons, I'm going to fill those in with some Vallejo Sky Gray as an initial base coat. I'm going to touch in some Kislev flesh in just a few places to reestablish some highlights. I'll leave it like that for now, and then once I get more paint on the model, I'll reevaluate how I like the shadows and highlights. To begin the uniform painting, I'm going to start painting the helmet in just the areas that are going to have this camouflage olive green. I want to leave the areas that are going to have a lighter kind of bone color so that I don't have to fight to cover them up, to cover this green up when I'm doing that. Well, this is obviously take two. Forgot to turn the camera on the first time. I'm going to paint some of these instruments metallic red. The instructions show them as a yellow color, but I don't really like that. By the way, this is an ammo of MiG color. I'm going to paint this view screen here with ammo of MiG Warhead Metallic Blue. It's a really nice, bright metallic color. For any additional buttons or levers or things like that that I want to add some color to, I'll use just a flat equivalent. This is Vallejo Flat Red. And I'll just paint a few of these on these buttons here using this and maybe an ivory color, just something to give it a little bit of distinction, but I don't want to make it, I don't want to make it appear as if it's glowing. If you're wondering where I'm getting my color callouts for the pilot, they've got them here in the instructions. So I'm just going by this. I'm going to do a little more shading and highlighting than they show there, but that's pretty much what I'm going by. Now for those lighter areas, I'm just going to rough paint those in Vallejo Sky Gray. I'll go back later and do some highlights. But when I'm painting white, I rarely use white. I generally use the Sky Gray as my base color and then work on some highlights from there and only use the barest bit of actual white for the very brightest highlights. Using the camouflage olive green that I used earlier on the helmet, I'm going to go ahead and start blocking in the rest of the uniform. One thing I always notice about these pilot figures for Bandai Star Wars kits, while the rest of the kits are just spectacular in terms of casting and detail, the pilots are always a little bit weak in my opinion. Like they show these leg straps being on the side of the leg there. There's nothing there. There's no molding. There's just nothing there. I painted them on and I'll be able to paint around them, and when you look in the cockpit, it'll look like that. But yeah, if Bandai could improve anything, it would definitely be the figures in their Star Wars kits. But I'll get this painted. I'm going to have to do it off camera so I can get in real close and see what I'm doing. But I'll get this painted and we'll go on from there. There's just a few black details that need to be painted. This box here on his chest will need a coat of black, and his boots. Being careful not to get it on his thigh warmers there. I guess he was on his way to aerobics when the Empire attacked. Using a mix of 3 parts Vallejo cold white and 1 part sky gray, I'm going to go in and paint these most upturned surfaces on the white areas. It'll give it a couple of layers because I've got the paint fairly thin. But what I'm wanting to do is just start bringing up this white to be a little bit brighter than it is right now. Now I'll use some pure white from Vallejo to just hit the very highest edges and really give that white some pop. Using a mix of 4 parts of the camo olive green and 1 part Vallejo beige, I'm going to go in and just start painting the upper surfaces that are facing the most light, I guess you'd say, on the uniform to begin bringing out some of the highlights there. A simple way to do this is just see where the light's reflecting on the model. I added some more beige to that mix, so now I'm going to go in and do the very highest highlights of the green part of the uniform. Final step will be just to add some highlights to the black parts. I'm using neutral gray for this. Now, I'll be the first to admit that figure is not going to win any awards. However, once he's on the seat, he starts looking a little better. And once he's actually in the cockpit and under the canopy, it should look okay. That's my theory, so I'm going to stick with it. With everything painted, I'll go ahead and reassemble the cockpit. All right, I've got the cockpit fully assembled, and I just loose fitted it inside the airframe. You can see I didn't push all the parts down tight so that I can disassemble it later. But once in place, I'm happy with how that looks. I know once I get it under the canopy and somebody's looking at it, it should pretty much look like a Star Wars cockpit with a Star Wars pilot in it. So, like I said earlier, I know the figure is not going to win any awards, but for the purposes that I want, which is some contrast, some shadow, and stuff like that, I think it's going to work. Now, one thing you may be asking yourself is, if so little of this is going to be seen, why spend so much time painting the cockpit? One, it's just fun. I enjoy painting, so anytime I can paint something, I'll paint something, even if it's not really going to be seen. But the other thing, and this is kind of an offshoot of that, is it's painting practice. Getting better at the craft of painting and building models requires that any opportunity that we have that I have, to improve in any area, whether it be painting a figure or painting details in a cockpit or weathering something, whatever, any opportunity that I can take to get more practice, to get more brush time in, I guess you'd say, then I do that. Like I said, even if it's not going to be seen or very minimally seen, it's fodder for video, so that's certainly a consideration. But I've always done this, even before doing videos, simply for the sake of practice, because there's something to be said about practice. I always think back to a time recently, in the last year or so, when somebody emailed me about a particular model, and they said, how long did that model take to build and paint and weather? And I started my answer kind of jokingly by saying 11 years and 350 models. Because, all of that, whatever you see, whatever you think of any modeler's work, it's not just the amount of time that went into that model. It's the amount of time that has gone into all of the models that result in whatever you look at. So I always try to make sure that I get in plenty of time as I'm working to always grow, to always improve, to always challenge myself to do things a little better, a little more refined, and hopefully improve in my skills. So I guess that's a mini deep thought within this video. Well, I know this video has been a bit short, but I think I'm going to call this done for this segment of the build, because the next thing I want to do is get the painting done and get some decals on, that kind of thing. And I know that if I start in on that, it's going to go much longer than I want to. So I think this is a good logical starting point to say I'm done for this part of it. This kit is fabulous. I just can't say enough good about it. And I'm sure during the next parts of this video that are going to come after this one, I'm going to start sounding like a broken record. But it really is just an absolutely magnificent kit. I would recommend it to anybody at any level of any age group, whether it would be your first model or your 500th model. This one is worth building. It really is. It has so much to commend itself. There's no problems with the assembly. The fit is beautiful. You can assemble it and paint it. You can paint it, then assemble it. There's so many different ways you can approach this. So if you've ever thought about building a Bandai Star Wars kit, this is the one that I would recommend to start with. Or maybe the Snowspeeder. Or this one. Just get them both. You'll like them. Well, thank you so much for watching this video. I am especially grateful if you are still watching at this point. That's always encouraging for me to see folks hanging around till the end of the video, so thank you for doing that. There is a subscribe button down over here. If you've not already subscribed, I would be most grateful if you would do that. And there's a little bell icon, so if you'd click that, just so you'll get notified when I have new videos coming out. I would be most grateful for that. There's also links down below to the social media that I'm on, so please connect with me there. I always like hearing from folks there. And there is a link to Patreon, so if you're interested in what I offer on Patreon, please click through there and see what's available. And of course, if you're already a Patreon supporter, thank you so much. I'm just truly grateful for the support that you give me, because it not only benefits me just in modeling, it benefits my family. The Patreon support is not just, hey, I found a way to make some money on modeling. It's truly part of our family income. Yes, a lot of it goes for modeling, but I'll have to tell you, there have been a couple of times that it's been Patreon support that put some tires on the car and fixed the radiator and things like that. So it is an incredible blessing, and I am so thankful for you guys that are supporting me in this work, because it truly does help me. It helps my family, and we are all very grateful for it. And as I always like to do, I'll leave you with one final thought. In this hobby, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Happy day to you, friends. Bye-bye.